Hey everybody, how you doing? Welcome to another live training, a live webinar training here at Davis Hemp Farms. We're going to get going in just a minute. I'm going to get everybody a chance to kind of get in and get settled. We always have, just people coming in. As you're coming in, just let me know that you're here, that you can see us, that you can hear us. And then let us know where you're coming from. We always love to see all the different people we have from all over the U.S. And all over the world that tend to join these webinar trainings. So do me a favor, as you're getting in, go ahead and just type in the chat. Don't be shy. Go ahead and type in the chat. The plan is for this to be a fairly interactive webinar. I'm going to be helping to host and kind of just move things along. But of course, as always, our main presenter, and of course, the person who has the ton of knowledge about this industry is joining me, and that's Jeremy Klettke.
Hey, everybody.
So we'll give you guys a minute to get going. We got William here. We got Dave from Michigan. Good to see you guys. Thank you for typing in the chat. As we're going here, guys, don't be afraid to type questions in the chat. We're going to get going on main topic in just a second. I'm excited about this because I know we've got a great just kind of teaching session. I think you guys are going to get a lot from this session today. So once again, we'll give everybody a minute just to get in. So just do me a favor and let us know that you're here and you can see us and hear us. As I said before, my name is Sean. I'm going to be helping just to guide along here. And we'll let Jeremy take it away in just a minute with what you guys are really here for. And that's to get the information really about field hardening, about seed germination, all the things that you are here for today. I think it's going to be a great training webinar for you. Cool. We got a bunch of people. We got Mike, we got Greg, we got Nathan, Steve, Ann is here as well. Thank you, Ann. Blaine as well, Dale, great. So thank you guys for coming in. Looks like we've got a few more people joining. I can see the ticker as people keep coming in, so that's wonderful. Thank you guys for being not being afraid to jump in the chat there as well. So as we go through here today, again, if you have questions that come up, feel free to put them in the chat. I'll make sure to get them to the team as we're going through. And if it's something that we want, it might be answered by some of the slides, we may hold on them. If not, we'll try and answer questions that come up. The goal is to have a good interactive webinar here for you guys and make it a solid training and something that you can take and start to use right away. So with all that being said, all right, we're going to go ahead and get started. And I'm going to go ahead and introduce our main presenter today. Many of you guys already know Jeremy just from interactions, both working in the industry, or you may have heard him on recent podcasts or been to one of our prior webinars. But Jeremy Klettke is the owner and CEO of Davis Hemp Farms. He has just really a ton of experience in this field. So over 30 years of experience, both here in the US and abroad, working with different types of cannabis plants and really working with farmers to help create a successful crop. And one of the people that's been instrumental over the past couple of years in helping to really figure out what is going to be needed as we start to have new regulations and start to have this kind of new wave of industry that's coming in as we're looking at the hemp industry. So I'm gonna let you go ahead and take it away, Jeremy. And if there's anything I missed, I know there's a ton more stuff. I'll let you go ahead and take it and introduce yourself.
Okay, great. Thank you guys for taking the time today, making the time today. Although I know some of us are stuck at home, but I know there's a lot going on in everybody's lives. So it means a lot to me that everyone is coming online to watch me talk about how we germinate seeds and get them to the field. And I'm ready to get going whenever. If you want to get the first slide for me, Sean.
Yeah, let me go ahead and pull that up. And as we're going through here, let us know if you guys have any difficulty seeing the slides, and we'll go ahead and start the presentation.
Yeah, please, let's keep it interactive. Everybody know that just communicate with me as we go forward. I'm happy to pause for a second and answer anything. But essentially what we're going to talk about today is like the first 14 to 17 days that you are going to deal with the plants. A lot of people have a little, questions about the best approach, how you get a seed germinated, how you get the highest viability out of your seed, and how you get them into the field without any mortality. So that's exactly what we're going to discuss today in this Germination and Hardening webinar. So I'll get started right away. Talk about, you get this box of seed here. So you order seed from us, you're going to get this beautiful box and then these containers of seed. And what do we do with them? Once we crack the lid off of them, how do we deal with them? It's a spooky thing for people who have spent a lot of money on this seed to get it in the door. And then suddenly they're presented with, well, he's given me a 98% germination rate. Can I achieve that? Can I meet or exceed that? So this is what we're going to try and do, is give you the tools that you need to make that happen. Okay, the first thing I want to talk about with you guys is seed viability. When the seeds come, at least from us, we're going to provide you with an overage to compensate for the loss on the germination rates that are stated by Oregon State University. So in the case of most of our genetics, they're 98 and 99%, but we're going to give you 1 or 2% overage on your purchase. And then usually we'll throw, another 0.5% in, just to make certain that you guys have enough to get your field full. And so that if you encounter seeds like this in the mix, you don't even want to, don't even feel like you have to mess with them. So again, when we're talking about seeds, the seeds that you want to identify when you're going through this that you'd like to leave out, or anything like that top one that's broken or cracked. The second picture there with an X on it is an immature seed. So anything that's white or undeveloped, you don't want to put in. And then lastly, we have highly viable seeds. And occasionally we'll see a situation where, just a tiny bit of moisture will cause that seed to start to crack. So that's that bottom picture. You're actually seeing the tail come out. And when you find that, you want to go ahead and remove that. It kind of went to light and then slowed down a little bit and went dormant again. So the 3 X's there, you want to avoid any seed like that. And what you're looking for are the seeds on the right. You just want a whole seed, not cracked, not damaged, something that you can see the eye on, something that you can see the tail on, and you don't see any real problems with that seed. So again, I think a lot of people get the seed and they want to, make sure and put everything in to try and get the highest germination rate they can. You don't really want to waste your time with this, and a good seed provider like us is going to provide you with an overage seed to make sure that your field is full. When you order seed 15,000, we know the amount of acres you're trying to get full. We know that you want 15,000 in the ground, and so we're going to do everything we can to make sure that you have 15,000 viable plants that will germinate and get going. So if there's any questions, like I said, go ahead and chime in. I'm happy to answer any questions as we move through this, but these are some of the things that you want to look for just in bad seed versus good seed. Ideally, you don't find too much of any of the X's in anybody that you purchase seed, or with anybody that you purchase seed from. Okay, so getting to the meat of this, when we talk about how you get seed into the ground, traditionally, I think most of the seed that is used in agriculture is direct seeded. When you look on the right there, you can see a seeding machine, an air seeder, or a seed drill, and that's a standard. And you certainly, I think, as we evolve in this space, we're going to get to more direct seeding. But for right now, partially due to the cost of the seed and the desire to get a full field, and partially due to the development and evolution of the technology, we're primarily dealing with transplants. So we've had some farmers that have direct seeded, and this seed is extremely attractive in the ground. So both rodents and birds come and have their way with it. And I think generally what we're seeing is about a 50%, 50 to 60% mortality on direct seeding hemp seeds, as far as what we've seen so far. So we want to avoid that for now. Now there is technology coming, I think, that's going to help us. But for now, again, for the purpose of this webinar, we're going to go through and just talk about transplants, producing and hardening transplants. And I'll show you on the next slide a little bit of the technology that we see coming that we think is going to change the game, but it's not quite developed to the spot that we need it to be yet. So here's a company that we found that does hemp seed coating, and you can see that they're doing biopriming. That's to give the seed a good charge, and we see the value in that. But like I told you, what we're really seeing the problem in the field is mortality. We're seeing that the plants are being eaten, the seeds are being eaten, the seedlings are being eaten. So aside from bio, I think we need to find something that is, going to be not attractive to rodents and birds when we go to put this in the field. So once we get there, I think we're gonna start to explore more direct seeding. I would say we did a fair amount of it last year just to learn. We're going to do a fair amount of it this year just to keep the process going forward, and eventually I think we'll be there. And that's going to be good for farmers that are doing more than 100 acres, 100 to 1,000 acres or above. But for now, this webinar, what we're going to go into, we're going to skip right over any of the direct seeding, and we're going to go right into transplanting, germinating, creating transplants, and getting hardening and getting transplants into the field. Okay, so when you're looking at doing this, obviously scale of what you have to do plays a big factor into how you approach it. But these materials that we pulled out are kind of just the smallest scale sort of materials that you would look for if you were going to do this all on your own, if you're going to set seed and go about it on your own. So I would say that there's kind of a line there, maybe 15,000 or more. You want to start talking about, looking at a transplant company or getting some professional transplant space set up. But, on a small scale, this is a great way to do it by hand. So some of the materials that you need is a nice set of tweezers, some ability to tag and mark plants. Obviously, the bottom left, I think, is the most important one that I discussed here. You can use either a plug media like a rapid rooter or a root riot, which is organic and peat based, or you can use soil to fill your flats. But just want you to know there are a couple of options right there. We generally do use, especially on smaller scale, we'll use a plug like that. They do a really good job of retaining the right air to moisture ratio, and you don't have to spend as much time watering them. So it's just a little bit simpler process. But again, you get to scale, and then soil becomes the only option. The next picture that you're looking at right there is actually a transplant company picture, and that is a 360 flat. So these flats are they're standard size, but the sites in them vary. So you can get from 36 all the way up to actually 24 all the way up to the 360s. We suggest, or we recommend, using a 72, 96, or a 128. If you get up to these 360s, like you see on that bottom middle picture, you end up with really spindly plants. Sometimes they're hard to get out of the tray, and you do see a higher mortality from the transplanting equipment into the field. But it is a great way. This company here that you're looking at that picture from, they're a company out of Fresno, and they did 240,000 for us last year like that. So if you get to scale, like I said, it's good to look at that. But doing it yourself, I think if you go to much higher density than a 128, you don't get the same transplant into the field. You end up with a taller, more spindly transplant that just, light can't penetrate down into that canopy and help that thing to bush up. So they have a lot of catch up to do once you put them in the field. Okay, now on this slide, we'll talk a little bit about setting seed. So if you're setting seed yourself, this is about the depth that you want to look for. So if you're in a plug like that, it's a little bit denser, tighter medium. So you don't want to go with the top of the seed much more than about a 1/4 inch down below the top of the surface. You can get away with 3/8 up to 3/8 in soil, because the seed doesn't have to work as hard to push up out of the soil medium as it does out of this peat style medium. Now that top right picture there is a picture of the different ends of the seeds. And what we're showing you there is that the eye on the seed, when you set the seed, is what you'd really like to have up. Now, this isn't critical. The seeds are going to find their way no matter what. But when you look at the seed there, the bottom of that seed is designed to split and push the root tail out. The top of that seed will actually shoot up towards the sky. It will split, and eventually the cotyledon will push that seed casing off of there. But again, they have to switch around and kind of adjust themselves if you put the tail up. It won't matter as we get into like needle seeding and stuff and scale and volume. That's why I say that, because you're about to see these needle seeders we're going to show you, or these air seeders, and you would struggle to get that seed placed that way. But if you're going to plant them all by hand, we wanted to show you the exact proper way. And you're talking to a guy who, has done a lot of high value seeds that you want to get 100% germination out of. And, sometimes 10 packs, 20 packs, or 100 seeds. So it's not the same scale as we're talking about with hemp. So you can spend a little bit more time and attention to detail on each seed. So we don't expect that everybody's going to do this with every seed, but I want people to know the appropriate direction that a seed should go in and the depth that it should go in order to get quick and proper germination. Okay, So now when we talk about scale, that first picture, obviously we're hand setting seed with a tweezer. As soon as you get up to some kind of scale, it's going to be difficult to do. When you're at moderate scale, I think this piece of equipment on the left is a good piece of equipment to look into. They're not very expensive. It's a vacuum seeder. And essentially what it does is it hooks up to a shop vac. You flip the shop vac on, you set it into the tray of seeds. It pulls the seeds up to every hole, every site, or every hole that it correlates with each site on the tray. And then as soon as you flip the vacuum off, it drops the seed into the spot. Now all you have to do is essentially take something like a pencil eraser size unit or a little smaller and just set the seed down that eighth or quarter of an inch. Now, when you get up to a scale, I'd say again above 15,000 or better, you want to start looking at this equipment on the right. And these are two pieces of equipment from a company called Bolden and Lawson. I think they're a very reputable company for nursery equipment. It's BOULDIN and LAWSON, just like it sounds. And what you're looking at here are two sets of equipment. The first piece of equipment is a flat filler. So basically you have a hopper, you're going to run your flats through that conveyor, and depending on the size of the flat, it has a unit that presses and sets the soil, and they just roll off of that conveyor full and ready to go. The piece of equipment on the top, they're going to slide right through, and that is the seeding unit, and that's going to set the seed in every site on that tray. And they set them to depth, actually. So when you buy this piece of equipment, the depth is no longer an issue. You make your adjustment, and away you go. You can set this up with a conveyor so that it's just, these conveyor systems are cheap, just like those rollers. You can get a 20-footer, just set them up so you can roll out flats. And that is really the fastest way and most economical way to put out flats. So it's certainly worth looking at one of these when you start getting to scale. I don't think they're that cost prohibitive. Matter of fact, I think this is something that's noteworthy. Most of the ag equipment is not cost prohibitive. It's based on the ROI that these guys are getting out of the field, and a lot of the return on some of these crops is just not that high. We're working in a crop with a pretty good margin, but bottom line is you're going to find all the tow behinds and implements, anything that's PTO driven, any of these nursery equipments like the planter or the seeder. These things are not going to be cost prohibitive for you, so don't get spooked off. Certainly take the time to do a little bit of due diligence if this is something that tickles your fancy, and give Bolden and Lawson a call and talk to them about it. Or there are a number of other companies, but that's a group that I know is reputable and has been doing this for a while. And you can find the ones on the left. There are 4 or 5 different manufacturers of them out in the marketplace, and they're not too expensive, just a couple $100. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about hardening environment. So now we've set the seed, we've got the trays full, we've watered them in. Now it's about, what do we do for the next 14 days? And you're going to see these things are going to come to light very quickly. 24 to 48 hours, you're going to start seeing heads popping up. So, with that kind of viability, it's also important to make sure that you don't have a long delay or lag time between, setting the first tray and setting the last tray. You want to be really close at the time that you set all these seeds and wet all these seeds, so that you have a uniform canopy going out into the field. Now, on the left here, you're looking at probably the nicer end of the infrastructure that you would need to do this. So that is a properly trussed greenhouse. That one there has double wall poly. It's got some supplemental lighting in it, which brings to mind, if you guys are going to do supplemental lighting at all, be really careful about photoperiod extension, because one of the things that kind of messes the plants up is if you're running an 18 to 20 and then suddenly you stick them out into a photoperiod that's natural, that's more like 15 or 16, even though you're still in the side of the curve where your days are extending up until the 21st, it still is a little confusing to the plant when they go into a 3 or 4 hour reduced light cycle like that. So, try in as much as you can match. You can obviously get yourself more par lighting, more micromoles by adding the supplemental lighting early in the morning, late in the evening, but just try and closely follow the photo period. The outdoor photo period is my advice to you on that. But again, going back to the left here, we've got this beautiful greenhouse. You set some tables up in there, you get some heating, keep it moist, get some misters set up. You're going to want to be keeping no cooler than about 55, 60 at night. The heat doesn't matter so much as long as you've got misters. If you are in a really hot area and you're going to use a greenhouse like this, I would advise you to use shade cloth. And, essentially anything that helps the plant, what we're trying to do here is anything that helps the plant to slowly adjust from being a tiny little infant that's not used to the environment to being prepared to go out in the field within 14 to 17 days, where it's going to be exposed to, different temperature differential extremes than it would be inside. So we're going to slowly introduce those environmental influences to the plant. So the one on the right there, you see all these little parts and pieces. What I don't want anybody feeling like is that, they're going to have to spend a huge outlay on infrastructure just for this 2-week period of germination and hardening. And one of the things that we encourage people to look at is building Schedule 40 hoops. If you take all of these components right here and 20-foot sticks of 1-inch Schedule 40, you can build yourself an incredible little hoop house. I think you can build about 1,000 square foot for $500. You can cover it with, if you want to use if you want to reuse it, you can use some good UV poly, buy some greenhouse poly, but you can go all the way to just buying some basic clear poly at Home Depot, just some drop cloth type poly or painting poly. But yeah, these are like about $500 or $700 for about 1,000 square foot, $500 to $700 for about 1,000 square foot. And if you guys want, we can certainly send you the schematics on how to build something like that. So don't hesitate to ask afterwards, and we can give you the design for what we use. But I do want you to know that you just don't have to worry about, spending thousands of dollars on infrastructure. I want to say this greenhouse on the left is like a $15,000 greenhouse at 3,000 square foot, maybe $20,000. So you just don't feel like you have to go that far for your infrastructure. You just need something that can kind of insulate you and protect you from, the extremes outside. And that being said, when we're talking about hardening, when we talk about that drop cloth, there are a few variables you want to look at. That shade cloth is really good. It's, if you get a 30 or 40% shade cloth, now you have the ability to, during the, you could leave it on to start out the first couple of days for the entire day, for the entire photo period. But then you can start just leaving it on during the middle of the day and pulling it off during the mornings and the evenings to sort of expose the plants to the full extreme of the photo period and what the sun is going to do. And the same goes for the way that you're dealing with your humidity and the way that you're dealing with your temperature. The idea here is that we have an insulating room that's going to protect the plants when they're young from those extremes, but we don't want to just hammer them out in the extremes after 2 weeks without them seeing any of it. So it's a good idea 4 or 5 days in to start where you can, exposing the plants. So if you have roll-up sides or ends that you can open, go ahead and open those during the middle of the day so that you can feel what the actual VPD is going to be like once it starts to get into the real air. Same with the shade cloth, like I said. So just know that over that 10 to 14 days, the goal is to try and, match. We're going to initially start out creating the perfect environment for those plants, a 70 to 75 degrees, a 70 to 80% relative humidity, and maintaining that as best as we can. And then over that 2-week period, we want to start slowly introducing them to, some of the variability in the environment, to the point when that 14th or 17th day, when you're ready to take them into the field, the idea is bulk of the day, they are exposed. You want them to be ready. So the bulk of the day, you want them exposed by that 14 to 17 days. So keep in mind, that's just a slow and methodical process. And I'd love to hear any questions about that if I didn't elaborate enough, but let's skip right on to the next one. Okay, and this is an interesting one to talk about here, is that, it goes back to the density of these starts. Now, what you're looking at on the right here is a professional operation that's doing 360s. And I think what you're looking at there are a portion of those 240,000 plants that this group did for us last year. Now, that being said, if you look at that one flat and all the sites in that flat, you can get a really clear picture of how dense those plants are and how much they're competing for any amount of room. So these will go in the field, and they'll make it okay. We've seen it. There's not a high mortality, but you really have very, little flexibility. Once you get those, you need to get them right out into the field, or they're going to shoot up and bean pole, which is one of the most dangerous things that can happen with hemp. We see a lot of plants going into the field that are 18 inches tall and, a little straw, basically. That's certainly something that you want to avoid. It looks real nice as a full canopy when you're looking at them in trays, but as soon as you go pull them out and set them into the field at the right planting density, then all of a sudden you just have these little stringy bean poles that are trying to catch up and broaden out. You certainly want, these to break apical dominance naturally. That's something that we've bred for here, but when you look at yield potential, you start with that bean pole, and then it doesn't have a split top. It doesn't have any branching coming off. It tends to just want to shoot straight up, and your yield potential goes way down from there. And the ones on the left, I think you can get an idea. You can start to see that these are likely in like a 72 or a 96. They've come up, and even at 6-7 inches tall, you can start to see some nice branching on them. That's the other end of the extreme. I think there's a happy medium there. If you don't have a lot of space, because that's another thing. You're limited on square footage here. Obviously, a 360, in an 11 by 22 tray is going to carry a lot more plants than a 72 in the same 11 by 22 tray. So keep that in mind. But yeah, I think you'd really like to see something a little bit better on the left, a little bit more like on the left than you're looking at on the right. And just know, if you do go with one of these transplant companies and they put you into a 219 or above as far as the density of a tray, you have a really limited window to get those out of the transplant company and get them into the field. So you have to move very quickly. Like I said, not that it doesn't work, it's just not optimal. Okay, and finally, I just want to talk a little bit about the planting equipment. I see, and remember, we're on transplanting now, so we're transplant specific, but I see a lot of the consulting groups out there, making this first 2 weeks into a really big part of this. And that's why we wanted to do this webinar, is kind of dispel some of the myths there, kind of let the farmers know that none of this stuff is out of your hands. If you guys want to do it, farmers are extremely capable. You guys have been doing everything in-house forever. This is no different. You don't necessarily, and I'm not devaluing a consultant, okay, because the consulting groups are critical for other elements of the field management and harvesting. But as far as this first 2 weeks, if you're going to hire a consulting group just to get you through these first 2 weeks, I ask you to rethink that. I don't know that that's 100% necessary. And what we're looking at here again is 2 pieces of equipment. And going back to what I said earlier about the cost of this equipment having to be reasonable, so that these people can end up affording it, get in the field without getting buried. And so a piece of equipment like this one on the left is a Rainflow 1600 water wheel transplanter. It's your basic transplanter. It hooks right up to the PTO on your tractor. That's a 2-seater right there. I've seen these things under $2,000. So they're not super expensive. You can get them pretty reasonably. If you want to go a little bit more elaborate, the one on the right there is a Chechen Magli. A little bit nicer setup. And these are nice thing about these is these are expandable. So you can buy a 2-seater to start. And if you decide you're going to do more hemp next year, you can expand out to 4 or 6 seaters, multi-row planters. But really, you can plant several acres a day with the one on the left there with the Rainflow. And essentially the way that works is you're going to fill those 2 tanks up with whatever planting nutrient or inoculant that you want to get started. Every time that the wheel hits a site, it punches a hole in that plastic, which you don't have to use mulch plastic. You can if you want, but it's not necessary. So don't get confused by that. But it pokes a hole in that plastic or puts a place for you to set a plug in. You drop a plug in. The trays sit on those racks. You drop the plug in and on down you go. A lot of times it's good to have a guy coming behind, making sure they're all in straight up and down, and then filling the holes and making sure none of the soil has come up around the stem higher than it needs to be on that little plant. But yeah, these pieces of equipment are not cost prohibitive. This, like I said, Rainflow 1600, you can find them in a number of places. That's the one on the left. The Chechen Magli is the one on the right. That's a little bit more high end. But don't hesitate to reach out to those two companies if you guys are looking for planting equipment. That's a great option for you. Okay, well, we've breezed through this one, which is good. If we don't need to take an hour, I don't need to take an hour of your time, but I'd love to turn it over to you. I know I've just cruised through that, but I'd love to turn it over to anybody that came up with any questions out of that. And, please don't hesitate to ask. I'm looking at the chat.
All right, sounds good. I'm going to go ahead and pull a couple of questions that were posted earlier. And I'm going to start with Kenny's question. And Kenny says, Jeremy, in the event we don't germinate all the seed, what are the optimal conditions to store the remainder that so that they remain viable for use in the future? Is it necessary to germinate all the seeds if they've been exposed to high humidity environment?
Well, now that's a good question. It's not necessary to germinate them, and they'll stay very well. So if you keep a seed in a cool, dark environment and don't expose it to any moisture, it's going to stay for a long time. I mean, you see a really slow decrease in viability, meaning like over a year, you might see a 3 to 5% if it's stored well. We have seeds that are 25 and 30 years old for our breeding program that we're germinating all the time. Now, sometimes we need seed cracker and sterile agriculture to get that to happen. But the point is that these seeds stay viable for quite a long time. Now, the second part of the question, if you do expose them to high humidity, you may see that going back to that first picture that we had, and I'll go ahead and cruise back there real quick and show you guys, but you may end up with some of those tails down on the bottom. So that bottom picture right there, that's a seed that cracked due to high humidity. So high humidity exposure will cause that to happen. And if you see that, you want to eliminate that. But again, that's high humidity. That's 80-85% sustained for 8 to 12 hours. So as long as you don't have any condensation forming, and that's another thing, be really careful if you're removing them from one extreme to another, that you don't create any condensation just to the change of environment. That will cause you a problem. But other than that, you can keep seed for a very long time.
So excellent question. We've got a few more questions in here. I want to let you guys know that if you have questions that come up or something that you want to talk about your specific field or your specific farm, just know that we've gone ahead and created some times available over the next 2 weeks to take some calls with our team. So I posted that link up above. It's davishempfarms.com/strategy. I'm also going to put this, it'll come up as an offer. Hopefully you guys can see this, where you can just go ahead and hit that button to schedule a time. If you want to spend a little bit more time and talk with someone about this and how to focus on the right strategy for your farm in upcoming year, I want to make sure you're getting things set right. You said we set aside several kind of 30-minute strategy calls sessions, so you guys can use that link right there to go ahead and schedule those. So it should be in the offer and it should be in the chat. And with that said, I'm going to go ahead and bring up a couple more of the questions. So first of all, Mike said, great job. Thanks. I appreciate that, Mike. Jason had a question back. He said, is there seed insurance? If so, if he receives a bad seed, is there a refund policy on bad seed?
Well, so again, internal policy, we're certainly going to take care of farmer to farmer as a company, but I don't know that there is insurance on the seed. I know that there's crop loss insurance that you can apply for from the federal government right now. You're going to want to look at all the components of that and see how much it plays into, early germination versus force majeure or severe weather event in the back end. But as far as we're concerned, we want you to have a full field. So there's no question about it. I mean, we've had situations in the past where I've had farmers actually call me and say, hey, look, it wasn't your fault. We learned the process. We made a mistake, but we lost, X thousand seeds. And we pretty much have a policy of sending them out the seed. I mean, we don't want to be taken advantage of, but at the same time, I want to see every farmer have a successful field. Your success is our success. Your farm's success is our success, and your failure is ours. So holes in the field don't work.
All right, next question we have is from, let's see, Mr. Hunley. He says, I want to mention that the 128 tray to the field worked great planting with an old water wheel planter last year. So just an aside, that using some of the way you just talked about. So a 128 tray to the field and working with an old water wheel planter worked great.
Thanks, Kermit. That's great. And, anybody else that has experience, it brings up a great point. Chime in. I mean, this is an open forum, and I want to share. We've been doing this now 5 years with the farmers, and had obviously gone through most of the learning curve, but if you guys have learned anything that we didn't bring up, I'll be happy to hear from you. And thank you very much, Kermit, for that insight. I agree. Anything under 200 is going to be reasonable for you, but we do like to stick to 128s, 96s, 72s. They just give the plant a little bit more of an edge going into the field.
And then Brent had a question about this presentation being available later. So just so you know that we are going to have a replay link. And so that replay link will be sent out to you after this. And now it takes a little bit for the system to get the recording done. So it may be sent out either later tonight or tomorrow morning. But you'll absolutely have access to this entire presentation. And then anybody that you you think would benefit from this, feel free to send them that replay link. Like, we want this to get out to as many farmers as possible. As we've talked about through these webinar series, it's like, an informed and educated farmer is a successful farmer. So we want this to get out to as many as possible. So once the replay link is available, absolutely, you can share that, and you'll have that for your knowledge as well. And then Dale says, when hardening off plants, do you find it better to place in direct sunlight right out of the greenhouse, direct sun in the morning, or shade in the afternoon?
Well, obviously the strongest sun's going to be right at noon when the sun's straight overhead. So that's the time you're going to want to watch. And what I would tell you that's a really good tool to know about this plant is it's really communicative. So if you start pushing the envelope with the plant and what it's going to accept. First, Dale, I hope I explained that well, that, obviously the peak of the day is going to be the hard time, and you're going to want to have your shade cloth over if you're going to have it on at all. But one of the things that you can look for on this plant is what we call flagging. So when the plant endures any kind of stress, the leaves will start to actually curl and flip a little bit. So that's a little bit of a pre-indicator to a shock, right? So if you're watching for that, and it usually shows like in the first 20 to 30 minutes. So our SOP or our protocol here when we're dealing with sensitive plants and trying to get them more prepared for the environment is to make the change, make the adjustment, whether that's opening the sidewalls up and exposing them to a little bit more direct air, or removing the shade cloth and exposing them to higher heat and more intense sunlight. We're just watching for 20 to 30 minutes. If the plants start to do that flagging, which once you see this, it is so obvious, then we'll go back, we'll just take a step back. We'll go ahead and put the cover back on. And it's the same with hardening clones out of a tray. You're doing the same thing. You're just slowly exposing the environment. And once you learn, I mean, that's great you brought it up, Dale, because once you guys learn that visual, trick that you're looking for, where the leaves will just start to roll or just start to flip or start to fold and curl, that's a great tool. As soon as you see that, you just reverse your move. You've put a little bit too much pressure on it. And, let's say you were able to get away with that move that you just made for 10 minutes this time before you saw the flagging. Now go ahead and try next time for 15. The plants will respond. They're quick. They're trying to learn. And if you watch for that flagging, you don't have to get to a situation where you're ever going into a full shock. And a full shock is they just drop. That being said, though, guys, it's important that you know that if you do push them that far and they go into a full shock, a little bit of mist, reverse the step that you've just gone too far with, and they're generally going to pop right back up in an hour and come to light again. So don't feel like you screwed the pooch if you start seeing them go to shock. They'll come right back for you. They're a pretty tough plant.
All right, the next question I see is from Jim. Jim says, I'm using 50 cell trays. Let me see if I could just move on. I'm using 50 cell trays. What's our ideal plant height at planting?
So I'd like to see you have about a 6-inch. And a 6-inch plant is also going to be, a nice little softball size plant. If it's a 6-inch little tiny stalk, you probably want to let it go to 8 inches just to get a little bit of branching on it. But about a 6-inch tall plant and a 50 should be really nice. And I think that last picture that we were looking at of the 50s, of the 72s or whatever on the left side of that screen, that's about what your plant should look like when they go in the field.
Cool. And then Kermit says, just another tip, he said, we kept it simple and raised the walls in the greenhouse. That wind made a big difference. We had a couple on the ground, and roots will find earth through the tray if it has time to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you don't want that to happen. Matter of fact, that's a really good point. Again, Kermit, thanks for bringing that up, because what will happen is if they're going into the earth, likely they're going to be circling too. And circling is a problem. So if you've got that little plug and the roots get to the bottom, and then they start to go around and around and around, eventually they can cut themselves off. So they can cut a more mature, for the tail of the root can cut a more mature part of the root off and actually cause you some problems that way. So you want to make sure that you have good root development, but not too much. There's a window, and that's where we're looking at that plant size. That plant size also correlates to the root sizing underneath. You get too much root, you're going to have problems getting them out of the trays. You're going to have problems with circling, and you're going to have mortality in the field.
Cool. And then Dale says, thanks for the quick explanation on the hardening off. Brent says, how long will it take to get the 6 to 8 inch in a 50 cell tray if it's under 24 hours of light?
Okay, and you want to be careful about 24 hours of light. Remember that, because now you're going to expose the plant to a serious photoperiod reduction as soon as you go to put it into the normal light. So that being said, close to the photoperiod that you've got, strengthen the photoperiod. You can watch for that first light, and you can watch for that last light, and you can make sure that your lights come on right with them so that they have the maximum amount of micromoles of power lighting from sun up to sunset. But what you're looking for as far as a timeline goes is about 14 to 17 days is generally what it takes. It can take, in a 50, they get really good exposure. If you're using L pots and a good mix, you could get that as soon as like 11 days. But 11 to 17 days, maybe we see them as slow as 20 on the outside if you have some struggling moments. But generally just figure 14 to 17 is about what we call for.
All right, so if you guys have more questions, again, you can go ahead and fill out here. If you're watching this on the replay, because I know there's going to be a lot of people watching this again on the replay, we put that offer card up. You can click on there, or you can go just directly to davishempfarms.com/strategy. That'll just pull up a calendar where you can fill in a time. Like I said, we open up time for 30-minute calls over the next couple weeks to speak with Jeremy, to speak with the team, to look at what's going to be right as far as equipment, as far as seed, and really making sure that you're set for success in this upcoming year.
Yeah, guys, these webinars, the whole series, is really about giving you the tools you need to get in the field and to protect yourself from getting the wrong genetics. But the driver here is to get on a call. If anybody has any other questions, wants to get deeper into this, that's really what we're here for, is to make sure that you guys know that we would love to give you a 25 to 30-minute call. So if anybody has anything that we're not answering, make sure that you schedule that call. You get the free time with me. We can go over anything that you want, and I'm happy to, because what we see this year is, ideally tragedy narrowly averted, but we're setting ourselves up for a tragedy. We have, looks like about 90 to 95% of the seed on the market is not viable for total THC compliance. And we're concerned. There are a lot of other factors. Last year, we saw just really bad seed for other reasons. We saw, bad fem rates. We saw bad germ rates. We saw seed that's not good for your environment or your climate being sold to you. So, we want to make sure that we're here through this series to support you and avoid a train wreck this season with the hemp industry. A lot of new states coming online, a lot of new people coming online, a lot of predators out there. It's a snake oil industry, and we just want to make sure that you guys have the tools, because it's buyer beware. Unfortunately, in this day and age, I don't think it'll be the same next year, because we do see that, there's lawsuits going out against these farms now. They're being held, against these seed producers now. They're being held accountable a little bit more than they were historically. So we think that there's going to be a lot of attrition. They're going to fall by the wayside. But this year, guys, you have to be vigilant. You have to be really careful about who you're dealing with as a consultant, who's giving you advice, who's providing you with genetics. So please understand, that's why I'm standing up here today, is to give you guys a little bit of exposure to some of the fears and concerns that we have, but most importantly, to give you access to me, to let you know that you have access to me. I don't know it all, but I'm also a guy who's happy to tell you I don't know. I don't have the answer. When I don't have the answer, usually I do. I've been in the space for a very long time. I've committed my life to it. So generally speaking, I will have the answer to most of what you guys need, but we can certainly find it if we don't.
All right, I don't see any questions right now, so go ahead and feel free. We're going to do a last call for questions, and we'll get you guys back to what you got going on here. I know we've got several people here watching. Again, people like Jim, William, Dale, and if you guys have questions, Steve's coming from Maryland, so if you have questions about that area, happy to talk about those things. And again, if it's more specific to your setup, we're happy to get on a call one-on-one to talk about that as well.
Yeah, and we know most of your states too. That's something I really want to point out, is that we've spoken to the departments of ag in most states. I think we're registered in 42 states right now. We're going after the last few. There are a few states that aren't allowing hemp this year. Mississippi, I think South Dakota turned down their state plan. Idaho's another one. But yeah, we've been to most of your states. We've dealt with most of the departments of ag in your state. We've jumped through the hoops that they need us to legal seed in your state. So, in most cases, we're familiar. So don't hesitate. And we're familiar with the bioclimates and bioregions and microclimates. That's something I don't think a lot of these guys are really talking about either, is, where's your seed do best? I mean, we actually have developed seed for places that are, like Arizona and the Imperial Valley, where you have extreme temps and low water. So, really drought tolerant plants, really heat resistant plants. And then of course the other end of the spectrum is we've developed plants for like Montana and Vermont that are, highly frost resistant and highly mildew resistant. And if your breeder can't tell you, your seed provider can't tell you that they've, created seed that's good for your environment, you certainly want to, learn a little bit more and question them a little bit more.
All right. Kenny asked about the schematic for the small scale the hoop greenhouse for germination.
Yeah, you bet. So Kenny, if you want, I'll go ahead and send you I can send you a schematic of it. So we didn't want to fill the webinar with a 4-page schematic on how you build that, but it's pretty damn simple. I mean, you're taking Schedule 40 PVC 10s, sticking them into a cross at the top, bending those down, and then driving rebar into the ground, sliding the Schedule 40 over the top of the rebar, and then throwing, you have to build a skirt board for it, and a couple of things, but then basically covering that with poly. Very simple process, but I'm happy to send you like a little 3-page tutorial on parts that you would need, a takeoff list, and then how you put it together.
Yeah, and I would say if there's anybody out there that wants those types of things or specific questions, one, either schedule a call or just send us a direct email. You can go on to our contact us page at the website, or you can just email Jeremy, so jeremy@davishempfarms.com, and we can get some more specific things with you. But it's definitely, take that time to reach out. We don't want to send that to everybody, because I know that's not, for everybody on this call, but for those that would be applicable, absolutely let us know. Anne says, thanks so much. Do you have any experience or advice for growing grain?
For growing grain? For hemp grain? Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, it's a whole different ball game. Planting density is a lot higher, so your seeds per acre is a lot more, and you're going to want to make sure you choose a good variety. But there are some great varieties out there. Love to talk to you about that further. That again is a 10-minute conversation in itself. But we do have grain varieties. We're doing trials in Arizona with University of Arizona this year for some drought tolerant varieties, and then we're doing trials with University of Wisconsin. A lady named Shelby Ellis up there is doing some grain trials, as well as some cannabinoid trials. So we're maybe a little behind on the world scale as far as the grain stuff goes, grain and fiber stuff, but we're certainly coming, and that's only because we haven't been able to participate long in that side of things. And these French and Canadian programs have been established since the 90s, so they've been developing and working with genetics for like X59 and other things for a long time. But that's an exciting conversation. It's a conversation that we want to be a part of, and we think it's a big part of the future of hemp in the States here. So thanks for asking.
All right, thanks for everybody that attended today. We're going to say, I think that we pretty much got most of the questions that were here. I know a lot of people will be watching this on the replay, and if you are, make sure to hit that button or schedule calls so we can answer your questions. And again, if you feel this is going to be helpful, we want to get this into as many people's hands to get them successful. Feel free to share the replay link when we send it out. It's something we want to make sure that we get in the hands of many people. So any last minute words, Jeremy, before we head out?
Well, I guess a couple of things. One, I'd like to say that we are planning to do a panel here pretty quick with some experts on it. Get a couple of people from different facets of the industry to come and give you guys an opportunity to ask questions. I think we'll touch on some common questions, and then leave it to you guys to answer or to ask what you want. So I want to make sure that everybody knows that that's kind of the last thing that we're planning to do for the season as far as webinars go. But everybody, don't hesitate to reach out to me. And, I would do another webinar. We'd put an entire webinar on if there was a topic that people felt we missed. So we tried to touch on, some of the obvious things that you want to watch out for from your seed provider, some things about genetic selection, and then just kind of wanting to make sure everybody knows what to do with the seed so that they're not feeling too beholden to the seed provider to provide them with that info for those first couple of weeks of how to deal with it. But if I missed something, please, that's why we're here. Definitely build a whole other webinar if there's some topics that people see be touching on that will help the season to go off better. Because I think this 2020 season is a big season. We've got a lot of new states coming on, a lot of new farmers. We have the new change in the USDA rules. There's going to be some big changes coming in testing at the end of the season that I think people aren't paying attention to. So if you guys see anything that we can do collectively to try and get the word out, to help this year go off a little bit better for farmers, that's what this is all about for us. So appreciate everybody's time, and don't hesitate to reach out. I'm an open book. Other than that, I guess that's it. We'll let everybody get on with their beautiful day.
All right, sounds good. And then go ahead and close it out when you're ready, Jeremy. And then, and those of you guys that have questions, you can always, after watching the replay, let us know.
Thank you, everybody. I appreciate everybody taking some time out of their day. It means a lot to me. Everybody have a great day.